It was 4:30 a.m. The arrivals hall at O'Hare felt like a walk-in freezer. I was dragging my suitcase out when the whole city was still asleep. The lights were a stark white, and a janitor was pushing a floor scrubber back and forth across the polished tiles. The automated female voice on the intercom gave the arrival information for the last flight of the night, with a hollow lack of emotion, that I found a 24-hour convenience store, bought a hot soy milk, and sat on a high stool to drink it. Only then did I feel the feeling return to my fingers. A 12-day business trip. I'd been to Chicago, Detroit, and Cleveland, visiting 7 clients across 3 cities. Every day was either on the road or in a conference room. The most exhausting day. I had 6 meetings in a row and was still in the hotel lobby at 11 p.m. revising a proposal with a client's director. My flight back was a red-eye. In economy, next to a guy who snored the whole time. I didn't get a minute of sleep, but that wasn't the point. The point was, I received 3 emails on the plane. The first was from HR, formal notification regarding your position adjustment. The second was from my direct supervisor. Mark Zhao. Leo, come to my office when you're back. There are some work-related changes we need to discuss. The third was a notification automatically forwarded from my backup email account about a change in my company system permissions. My account for the project management system had been downgraded. From project lead to an execution role. I stared at that email for maybe 10 seconds. Then I turned off my phone, put it back in my bag, and didn't reply to anything. At 6:30 a.m., I dragged my suitcase into the subway station. The morning rush hadn't fully started. A few sleepy people sat scattered in the car. I leaned against the door by the tracks, and my reflection stared back at me from the window. My hair was a mess. Dark circles were heavy under my eyes. I wore a faded gray windbreaker. I looked no different from the construction workers heading to their early shifts. I'm 29. I'd been at Shunghai Tech for 4 years. I started as a project assistant and worked my way up to project lead. I'd led a team for 3 years, delivered over a dozen projects, and never had a major screw-up. The wheels of my suitcase hummed against the marble floor in the company's lobby. The receptionist glanced up at me and gave an awkward smile. Leo, you're back? Yeah. She quickly glanced down at her phone, like she was sending a text. I noticed, but didn't say anything. I took the elevator up to the 7th floor. The office was the same as always. Even though it wasn't 9 a.m. yet, people were already at their desks, sipping coffee and typing away. I walked through the aisle, suitcase in tow. When I passed my old desk, I slowed down. Someone else was sitting there. A man I didn't know, young, with rimless glasses. He had 2 pots of succulents and a new MacBook on the desk. He was leaning back in an ergonomic chair, sipping coffee and staring at his screen. My nameplate, my folders, the mug I'd used for 3 years, all gone. In their place was a clean, new, sterile desk that looked completely out of place in the surrounding chaos. I stopped before I could even open my mouth. My colleague at the next desk, Zoe, saw me, her face contorted into a complex, conflicted expression, her mouth opening and closing. Finally, she just managed to say, Leo, you're back. Who is he? I asked, nodding at the guy with glasses. Before Zoe could answer, the guy swiveled his chair around. He looked me up and down, put down his coffee, and smiled. Hi. You must be Leo. I'm Chris, the new project lead. Mark told me to take this desk. He said it was convenient for communication. Mark Zhao, my direct supervisor, the man I'd worked with for a month. While I was on my business trip, he'd given my desk to someone else. I asked Mark in his office. Yeah, Chris said. He said to come see him when you got in. I left my suitcase by the hallway wall and walked to Mark's office door. I knocked. Come in. I pushed the door open. Mark was leaning back in his chair, looking at his phone. A Starbucks cup sat on his desk. He looked up, saw me, put the phone down, and put on a smile. Leo, you're back. How was the trip? Have a seat. I didn't sit. I stood in front of his desk and looked at him. Mark. Who is the guy at my desk? Oh, Chris. Mark leaned back, his tone light and casual, like we were discussing the weather. While you were away, the company made some personnel changes. Chris was transferred here from headquarters. He's got more seniority and more experience. He's taking over the project lead position. You'll be moving to a project execution role for now. Supporting his work. Supporting. I repeated the word. Supporting what? Supporting the new projects. Of course. Mark smiled. You know the company is going through a transition. Client demands are getting higher. I appreciate your skills, but sometimes we need someone with a bigger strategic vision to lead. Chris has experience at a top-tier firm. He's led teams of 100, Having him manage this project group will be good for everyone. Don't worry. Your salary stays the same for now. Before I left, you told me that after this trip I'd be promoted to project director. The smile froze on Mark's face for a fraction of a second. He picked up his coffee, took a sip, put it down, and twirled the cup. Leo, things change. Plans don't always survive contact with the real world. These decisions come from the top. I can't control them, but I'm serious. Once this transition settles down, I'll put you first for the next opportunity. You've been with me for 4 years. I've seen your dedication, Mark. I cut him off. Is Chris your relative? Mark's expression changed. He looked startled for a second, but he suppressed it quickly, letting out a dry laugh. What are you talking about? Relative. We hire based on ability, not connections. Then why did the half-year project I was working on get transferred to Chris while I was away? The client knows me. They called my personal cell to ask why I was being replaced. Mark's smile was completely gone. He was quiet for a few seconds. Then his tone grew cold. Leo, this is a company decision. If you have a problem with the arrangement, you can file a formal complaint. But for now, get back to work. Chris has some transition items he needs to go over with you. I looked at him, and he looked back at me. The air conditioning in the office hummed, making the corner of the papers on his desk flutter. I didn't say another word. I turned and walked out. When I returned to the main floor, Chris was standing by my old desk, chatting with Zoe. Seeing me, he turned and smiled. Leo, I had all your things packed up. They're in the storage locker over there. Mark said I should go over a few transition items with you. No need. I said that I brought in those clients. I visited them. I wrote the proposals. If you just take them, the clients won't accept you. Chris's smile slowly faded. Leo, that's not really appropriate to say. We're all working for the company. When did you start? He paused. The 15th of last month. I left on the 8th. That means you were hired a week before I went away. Mark was already planning to give you my job while I was still here. Chris's lips moved, but nothing came out. Zoe, sitting nearby, pretended to be typing, but her fingers hovered motionless over the keyboard. The whole office felt like it had frozen. Everyone's ears were pricked, but no one looked up. I walked to the storage locker and opened it. Inside was everything I'd had on my desk. A mug, a pen I'd used for 3 years, a few notebooks, and a group photo with colleagues. I picked up the photo and looked at it. It was me, Zoe, and another colleague who'd already left, taken at a team-building event last year. The background was a sunset over a lake. I put the photo in my pocket and closed the locker. Then I took out my phone. I opened my contacts and found a number saved under bro. I typed a message. Brother. Busy. Come on. Hit me. Need you to look up a company for me. Xinghe Tech. The legal representative is Mark Zhao. I need the ownership structure. I'll send you the details tonight. About a minute later, a reply came. What happened? Someone giving you trouble. I thought for a moment, then typed back. Yeah. The reply was immediate. On it. I put the phone back in my pocket and walked to my new desk. A temporary one, in the furthest corner of the office, next to the printer and the break room, surrounded by stacks of old discarded files. I sat down and turned on my computer. As expected, my system access had been cut. I could only access the basic functions for an execution role. All the project budget spreadsheets and client contracts I used to see were now locked. Mark walked out of his office and said something to Chris. They both went into the conference room together. Through the glass wall, I could see Mark laughing and patting Chris on the shoulder. Chris nodded enthusiastically. They looked like old friends. I sat in my corner, watching the printer spit out paper one sheet at a time. No one came over to talk to me. Zoe occasionally glanced my way, then quickly looked back. The janitor pushing a cleaning cart walked past and looked at me, saying nothing. Later that afternoon, a new email arrived in my inbox. It was from Chris, CCing the entire project team and Mark. Hello everyone. Due to the recent team restructuring, please be sure to CC me on all external communication going forward. All project documents are to be organized and transferred by Leo Chun. For any client-related needs, please contact me first. Thanks for your cooperation. The email ended with a smiley face. I stared at that smiley face for a few seconds, then closed the page. My phone buzzed. It was my brother. Got it. Xinghe Tech has registered capital of 500,000. The legal representative is Mark Zhao, with a direct stake of 37%. The other small shareholders own the rest. 63% total. But there's a catch. The company took out a bank loan last year, and Mark's personal property was used as collateral. If the company is acquired now, it makes things tricky. How tricky? Not insurmountable, but it'll take a little time to work out. What do you want to do? I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. A red ribbon hung from the central air conditioning vent, spinning endlessly in the breeze. I want this company to have a new owner. Done. Give me a week. I put the phone down. On my computer screen, Chris's email was still open. The smiley face in the corner glowed faintly. A week. 7 days. I picked up my mug and walked to the break room to fill it with hot water. The mug was white, with a faint inscription faded from years of use. It was part of the welcome package from my first day, printed with the company motto. Shenghe Tech, better with you. I carried the hot water back to my desk, opened a new document, and started writing. The title was Observations on Shenghe Tech's Project Management System and Client Relationship Maintenance. It wasn't for Chris. It was for what I needed to do in a week. Outside, the sky was growing dark. The office buildings on Financial Street were lighting up one by one. Chris's office light was still on. I could hear him laughing on the phone through the glass wall. I closed my notebook, put it in my drawer, and locked it. 7 days. I'd wait. Chapter 2. The Monday morning meeting was business as usual. Mark sat at the head of the conference table. Chris sat on his left. Across from Chris was my old seat, now empty. My chair had been pushed to the side. A stranger's jacket draped over it. I sat at the far end of the table, next to the door. There was no nameplate in front of me. No one poured me tea. Mark went over the quarterly targets. Chris gave a slick PowerPoint presentation, using data from the proposal I hadn't finished and the client feedback I'd gathered during my trip. He'd just changed the template, added a few slides on strategic vision, and put his own name on it. On the third slide, Chris said, "This client segmentation framework is something I optimized based on my experience at my previous company. It's more focused on high net worth demographics than the previous approach." My pen stopped. That framework was mine. I'd built it from scratch last year. He'd just rearranged the categories and changed the name. Mark nodded along. "This is a great approach from Chris. Everyone should learn from him. Broaden your horizons. Think outside the box." He said think outside the box without even glancing at me. But I felt it was meant for my ears. A couple of colleagues shot me a quick, furtive glance, then looked away. Zoe sat across from Chris, head down, taking notes, her pen pressing hard on the paper. As the meeting ended, Mark asked Chris to stay behind to discuss the timeline for the new projects. Everyone else filed out. I got up and walked toward the door. As I passed Mark, he called out, "Leo, hang on a second." I stopped. Mark glanced at Chris, who got the hint and left. Before the glass door shut, I heard him laugh and say something to someone outside. The sound filtered in. It was just me and Mark in the room. The morning sun slanted through the window, casting a long beam of light across the polished wood of the table. Mark leaned back in his chair, twirling a pen, not looking at me. His voice like he was talking to a subordinate he barely knew. "Leo, you've been with the company for 4 years, right? Almost 4. That's a long time. I was the one who interviewed you when you started. You were a real workhorse back then. You'd do anything. I admired that." He put the pen down and looked at me. "But some things can't be solved by hard work alone. The market is tough right now. If the company wants to survive, we need to evolve. We need new ideas, new blood. Chris can bring that, because he's better suited to take over my projects." Mark nodded, his expression bland. "Exactly. Then why didn't you tell me this before I left? Why did I have to find out by seeing someone else at my desk when I got off the plane?" Mark's mouth twitched, as if searching for a diplomatic answer. He couldn't find one. He paused, then said, "Because the decision came down from above. I didn't have time to tell you in advance." "Above who?" "The board of directors. Shenghe has 3 board members. You, your cousin, and your mother-in-law." "Mark, you're telling me above?" Mark's expression changed. He stared at me for a few seconds, then leaned back. Any pretense of politeness was gone from his voice. "Leo, you're testing me. I'm asking for a reason. The reason is what I just said." Mark stood up, placing his hands on the table and leaning forward, looking down at me from his full height. "Leo, I know you're capable, but you're stubborn. You control your clients too tightly. You refuse to delegate. Do you know how many times your team members have complained to me about your management style?" When Chris joined, the team dynamic improved. People are communicating better. That's something you need to think about. So you gave him my desk, my permissions, my clients, and now you want me to think about it. Mark straightened up and smoothed his tie. "I can't help how you feel about it. But if you can't handle things here, you can always leave. We'll give you a fair severance package." "I'm not leaving." Mark blinked. "I'm not leaving." I said again, my voice calmed. "I still have 1.5 years on my contract. I'll keep showing up and doing the work assigned to me. I can accept the transfer, But I won't resign. Mark looked at me, a new expression on his face. It was almost amused. He'd probably expected me to lose my temper, to slam the table, to throw a resignation letter in his face. But I didn't. Fine, he said. Then you'd better get to work. We need people in the execution role. He brushed past me and walked out of the conference room. His footsteps echoed on the floor. The door was left open, and the sounds of the office filtered in. People laughing, keyboards clacking, the printer humming. I stood alone in the conference room for a moment. Sunlight was on the table, and there was a faint, warm impression on the wood where Mark's elbow had rested. I smoothed the surface with my hand, then walked out and returned to my corner desk. The rest of the afternoon was menial. In my new role, there wasn't much I could do. I was assigned to organize old project files. I had to scan and upload contract numbers, sign-off forms, and payment vouchers from the past 3 years. This was work a summer intern used to do. The intern had left, and now it was my job. I sat in front of the scanner until 4 in the afternoon, the printer humming next to me. People came in and out of the break room, refilling their water. Chris walked past my desk once and paused, looking at what I was doing. He didn't say anything and walked away. At AT 5.30. A WhatsApp message from Zoe appeared. Leo, are you free tonight? Want to grab dinner? I glanced over at her. She was at her desk, pretending to look at her screen. I typed back. Sure, AT 6 p.m. I waited until most people had left before getting up. Zoe was waiting by the elevator, purse in hand. She looked nervous. We went to a small noodle place a block from the office. We ordered 2 bowls of beef noodles. When they arrived, steaming hot, with chili oil floating on the surface, I realized I was ravenous. I lowered my head and took a few big slurps. Zoe just held her chopsticks, not moving. She watched me for a moment, then said, Leo, I'm sorry about Chris. I should have told you, but Mark told us all to keep quiet. He said not to tell you while you were away. I know. And there's something else. Zoe looked down, stirring her noodles. Chris didn't actually transfer from headquarters. He'd worked at a few other places before. Nothing special. His wife knows Mark's wife. It's a connection through connections thing. Mark brought him in to push you out. I put down my chopsticks and looked at her. How do you know? AT the company dinner on Friday. Chris had too much to drink. He said, if it wasn't for my wife's connections, Mark would never have managed to get rid of Leo. I was right there. I heard him. The steam from the bowl rose between us, blurring the air. I picked up the chili oil jar and added another spoonful to my noodles. Continuing to eat. Leo, aren't you angry? Does being angry help? Zoe was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, so, what are you going to do? I looked at the remaining soup in my bowl. Let's finish eating first. When we finished dinner, it was dark outside. The neon signs were lit up along the street. We walked together for a while, and at the corner, Zoe hesitated. Leo, Chris is putting together a transition checklist. He wants you to hand over the source files for the project management template you built, the dynamic approval system, the automated vendor reconciliation spreadsheet. He says it's company property and needs to be archived. I stopped walking. That template was my life's work built in my spare time, on weekends, during late nights. When I started, everything was done on paper. It was slow and inefficient. I digitized the entire workflow and made it 60% faster. I never patented it. I never claimed credit for it. But it was 3 years of my work. When does he want it? Tomorrow morning. He wants to show it to headquarters as part of their new process initiative. I stood at the intersection. The evening wind was cool. On the side of a building across the street, a giant digital billboard was airing a news segment. A row of new buildings. A scrolling headline about a tech group acquiring an industrial park. Okay. I said I'll give it to him tomorrow. Zoe looked at me, like she wanted to say something, but thought better of it. I waved her off. Go home. Be careful. She turned and walked away, glancing back once before disappearing into the crowd. I stood at the corner, took out my phone, and saw a message from my brother that had come in earlier. Tomorrow afternoon, I've arranged a meeting with some of your company's smaller shareholders. The Tea House on Financial Street. You know one of them. Your company's tech VP, Mr. Wong. His wife and I are alumni. He's already agreed to talk. I replied. What time? 3 p.m. He's already on board. I put the phone back in my pocket and headed for the subway. As I walked past the billboard, I glanced up. The news segment had ended, replaced by a car commercial. A silver sports car was carving a beautiful curve along a mountain road. 3 o'clock tomorrow. Mark probably didn't know it, but someone was chipping a hole in the hull of his ship. Chapter 3. The next morning, I sent Chris the source files for my template. But before I sent them, I backed up all the version history and date-stamped modifications to a local folder. Then I put a simple line of encryption in a few key functions. The file would work normally for a while. If someone tried to copy it and use it wholesale, it would freeze up at the settlement phase in about 3 months. Chris replied quickly, "Received. Thanks for your cooperation." Leo. A new email notification automatically popped up. It was from my brother. It had an attachment and a single line of text. "Something for you to look at before the meeting this afternoon." I opened the attachment. It was a scanned copy of Shenghe Tech's original articles of incorporation. I flipped through a few pages, and my finger stopped on the mouse when I reached the shareholder list. Mark Zhao's ownership wasn't 37%. It was 25%. Another person owned 12%. The name column wasn't a real name. It was a placeholder for a proxy shareholder. And on the proxy agreement, under nominee, was a name I knew well. Christian. I stared at that name for a long time. Chris had been a silent shareholder in Shenghe Tech before he was even hired. He wasn't just here to work. He was here to replace me and oversee his own stake. Mark called this a headquarters transfer. I smiled, closed the file, and saved a screenshot of the proxy agreement to my encrypted folder, AT11.30. Chris walked past my desk after a meeting and patted me on the shoulder. "Thanks, Leo." I looked at the template. "It's really well done. Let me know if you have any other bright ideas." I looked up and returned the smile. "Don't worry. Take your time." He laughed and walked off. I watched his back disappear around the corner, then turned back to my screen and continued scanning files. A few more hours until 3 p.m. Financial Street. The tea house. That cup of tea would help me take back the helm of this ship. The tea house on Financial Street was tucked away in a narrow lane behind an office building. The entrance was unassuming, but inside it opened up into a hidden haven of Chinese-style partitions, bamboo curtains, and brass tea tables. The air was rich with the scent of aged pu'er. My brother had picked this place for good reason. It was quiet, private, and discreet. When I arrived, one man was already seated. He was in his 40s, tall and lean, with silver-rimmed glasses and a dark blue jacket, slowly turning a Celadon teacup in his hands. Ryan Wong, the VP of Technology at Shenghe Tech. He looked up as I entered and gave a short, silent nod. Not warm, but not hostile. I sat down across from him. A server came in, poured tea for both of us, and left, closing the door behind her. Mr. Wong, long time no see, I said. Leo. Ryan put down his teacup and leaned back, sizing me up. I was a little surprised when your brother called yesterday. We've worked together for 4 years, but we don't interact much. Still, that process system you built. My tech team finds it useful. Thank you. Let's skip the small talk. He sat forward, his tone direct. Your brother said you had an idea. I'm a straight shooter. Tell me what's on your mind. What do you think of the current state of Shenghe? Ryan raised an eyebrow. He picked up his tea, took a sip, and set it down. He was quiet for a beat. Mark knows how to play politics, but he doesn't know how to run a business. The company's been around for 8 years, but we're stuck. Bad management. Core resources are hoarded. No competitive product. Last year he wanted a digital transformation, but he barely glanced at your system and just told me, "Tech, keep an eye on it." Then this year, he brings in Chris to take your job. Honestly, I don't get the move. Maybe because you didn't know Chris is a silent shareholder. Ryan's hand froze on his teacup. He looked at me, his gaze suddenly sharp. What did you say? I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshot of the proxy agreement. Ryan stared at it for a long time. His expression went from confusion to shock, then to a cold, bitter smile. He's a shareholder, and he's here as my peer. He pushed the phone back. What is Mark playing at? He's turning the company into his own backyard. Mark's direct stake is only 25%. Add Chris's 12%, and they control over a third. If they win over the other small shareholders, they'll have a controlling stake. At that point, Mr. Wong, your 8% won't matter much. Ryan stared at me for a long moment, then laughed. Leo, you didn't set up this meeting just to tell me about Chris's shares, did you? I want to buy your shares. Ryan's smile froze, like someone had pressed pause on a video. The tea house was very quiet. I could hear the murmur of voices from another room, but not the words, "You want to buy Shenghe?" He asked, not me. I said, "My brother." Ryan was silent. He picked up his teacup again, not swirling it this time, just holding it, staring at the floating leaves. Leo, have you thought this through? Mark's a jerk, sure, but he's tight with the local government. If a new owner takes over, who's going to keep the subsidies and loans coming? My brother has handled bigger things. What does your brother do? I picked up the teapot to refill my cup. My movement's easy.mr. Long. Have you heard of Mingyuan Asset Management? Ryan's expression shifted. Mingyuan was one of the largest private asset management firms in the state, specializing in industrial acquisitions and distressed assets. It had a big reputation, but most people didn't know who its real controller was. My brother. I said 3 years ago. He acquired a manufacturing company 5 times the size of Shengyi. From due diligence to closing, it took 40 days. The local government worked with Mingyuan on that. That company didn't lay off a single person. In the year after the acquisition, the local tax base grew by 17%. Mark's connections don't compare. Ryan was silent for a long time. Then he picked up the teapot, refilled his own cup, and took a drink. He set the cup down with a sharp click. How much for my shares? Name your price. He laughed. Leo, you're a direct guy? I like direct. He named a number. It was 20% lower than my upper limit. Deal, I said, extending my hand. Ryan took it. His handshake was firm. His fingers dry. On one condition. He said, after the takeover, the tech department gets an independent budget. I call the shots. Done. We released each other's hands and tapped our teacups together. The tea was still hot, but it warmed me all the way down. When I stepped out of the tea house, the sun was shining. Ryan was walking to the parking lot. I stood at the alley entrance and called my brother. Ryan is on board. He owns 8%. With my 3% from the employee stock pool, we have 11%. What about the other shareholders? Mark's mother-in-law and his cousin. Right. Mark's mother-in-law has 15%. She doesn't care about management, just dividends. A new owner who keeps her dividend ratio intact. She's fine. The cousin is trickier. She's close to Mark, but she lives in the States and only comes back once or twice a year. She's not emotionally attached to the company. We can probably get her with an offer 20% above market. My brother paused on the other end of the line. Leo, are you sure about this? After the acquisition, you'll be Mark and Chris's boss. How are you going to face them? I stood in the alley. Above me was a narrow strip of blue sky. A few pigeons flapped by. I'm not doing this for revenge. I said that I'm taking back what's mine. How they deal with it is their problem. Fair enough. I'll speed things up on my end. Keep things stable internally. Don't let Mark get wind of this. He won't. He's too busy celebrating his master plan. I hung up and headed back to the office. At 4 p.m., it was business as usual. Chris was on the phone in the conference room, his voice full of forced charm. Mark wasn't in. He'd gone to see an important client. I sat down at my corner desk and went back to scanning old files. The printer jammed on a piece of paper. I went over to clear it and saw what it was. A draft of an internal memo, unstamped. The title read, Proposed Plan for Organizational Restructuring and Staff Performance Adjustments. I skimmed it. Starting next month, performance reviews would prioritize new management. Original project members would be reassigned to new roles. It didn't sound malicious on paper, but in practice, anyone who'd ever worked closely with me or had been on my teams would be pushed to the margins. I took a photo, saved it to my encrypted folder, and went back to scanning. 3 days went by. On Thursday afternoon, my brother texted, the mother-in-law signed. The cousin is working through the international paperwork. By Monday at the latest. What about Chris's proxy agreement? But there's a legal flaw. The authorization period was left blank. It says, long-term, with no end date. We can contest its validity. My lawyers are preparing the paperwork. I stared at the words for a moment, then typed back. Good. On Thursday evening, Mark came back from his meeting. He paused when he passed my desk, like he wanted to say something, but he just patted the back of my chair. Leo, how's the workload? Fine, good. Keep it up. He walked away, smiling. I watched his back. Sharp suit, shiny shoes, a stride full of confidence. The office AC was still humming, the printer still whirring. Outside the glass wall, the city's dusk was shifting from blue to deep purple, office lights flickering on one by one. I sat back down and looked at the white mug on my desk. The faded inscription read Xinghe Tech, better with you. The water inside was cold. Monday. For more days. I picked up my phone and texted my brother. Can we close this weekend? I want to use it on Monday morning. He answered immediately. We'll sign this weekend. Monday morning. All the paperwork will be in place. I put the phone down. The last light of the day faded outside. Only a few emergency lights remained on in the office. I grabbed my jacket, shut down my computer, and walked out. As the elevator descended, I closed my eyes. Chapter 4. Friday was a normal day. 9 a.m. morning meeting. Mark gave a market update. Chris reported on new client progress. Near the end, Chris turned to me. Leo, I reached out to a few of your old clients. 2 of them said their needs had changed. They might be reassessing the partnership. Did you have any special off-the-record agreements with them? He said off-the-record agreements with a casual tone, like he was just checking a box. But the whole room felt it. Everyone looked at me. Yes. I said. Chris's smile flickered. What kind of agreement? The client in Chicago, the owner's father, and I had 3 meetings. Always at 4 p.m. Because he liked to talk over tea. The contact in Detroit has a kid in 2nd grade. Every meeting, she'd have to take a call from the school. These details aren't in any file. There's no need to write them down. But if a new person takes over, you'll run into problems in the first month. Chris's smile was fading fast. I wasn't aware of those details. Would you like me to know? I said. My voice wasn't harsh, but it was final. Mark cut in. Leo, Chris is just taking over. These things it's for the good of the company. You should help him with the transition, Mark. Client relationships are built on trust. You can't transfer them with a file. I've already compiled the transition documents. I've included everything I can. What I can't write down, that's personal. It doesn't travel through a PDF. Mark looked at me. I saw the flash of fury challenging me cross his face. But he didn't call it out in front of the whole team. He just gave a tight smile. Fine. Just write down as much as you can. The meeting ended. I walked back to my desk with my mug. As I passed Zoe, she whispered, Leo, that was a little intense. Was it? Yeah. Mark's face was a picture. It's all the same. I took a sip of water. He's got one face. Zoe didn't reply, but I saw the corner of her mouth twitch. At lunch, I got a surprise invitation. HR's Maggie sent me a message. Leo, are you free at 2 p.m.? Could you stop by my office? There are a few things about your file we need to confirm. HR. File confirmation. The timing of this felt no coincidence. Sure. I replied. At 2 p.m. I knocked on the HR door. Maggie was at her computer. Her face had that professional smile. My employee file was spread out on the table, along with a printed document I immediately recognized. I read the title before I even sat down. Voluntary Separation Agreement. Leo, have a seat. She gestured to the chair across from her. You've been here nearly 4 years. Your performance has been good. But with the company restructuring, Mark and I have discussed your situation. He thinks you might be better suited for new opportunities. She pushed the document toward me. The company is offering severance plus 2 months of additional pay as a special transition package. Please consider it. I picked up the agreement and flipped through it. The terms were standard. The compensation was about 8 months of my salary. For most people, it was a decent offer, but the timing of this document was no coincidence. Maggie, is this offer from Mark? Her smile tightened. This is a company-wide decision. Is it Mark's decision? Or the board's? Maggie's fingers tapped on the desk. Leo, personnel adjustments are within management's scope. Then did you sign a stock purchase agreement when Chris was hired? Maggie went pale. She instinctively glanced at the door, then lowered her voice. How do you know about that? I've seen the documents. I said. Maggie, you've been in HR for 6 years. You probably know the company's employee relations better than anyone else. I need a favor. Take a look at the full file for Chris's agreement this afternoon. After that, you might not be in such a hurry for me to sign this separation agreement. She stared at me for a few seconds, weighing whether I was bluffing. She decided to play it safe. She picked up the office phone and dialed an extension. Jenny, bring me the files from Cabinet 3. Yes, the December archive batch. All of them. When she hung up, she looked at me, her tone softer. Leo, tell me the truth. What are you planning? I'm planning to give this company a new lease on life. I slid the separation agreement back toward her. Hold on to that for now. In a few days, you might want to handle it differently. She didn't take the agreement, but she didn't push it back at me. It sat on the edge of the desk, like a decision frozen in midair. I stood up and walked to the door. I paused with my hand on the handle. Maggie, you've been here for years. If there was a better opportunity, would you stay? She didn't answer, but her expression had changed. The rest of the afternoon flew by. I went back to my desk and kept scanning files. Chris spent 2 hours on the phone in the next room. Mark was out all afternoon. As she was leaving, Zoe stopped by my desk. Any plans for the weekend? Got a few things. She nodded. Okay. See you Monday. See you Monday. She left. I sat in the empty office, watching the light outside fade from pale gray to deep blue to ink. The high-rises of the city started to glow. Clusters of light like islands floating in the void. I took out my phone and messaged my brother. What time tomorrow? 10 a.m. Same tea house on Financial Street. All the documents are ready. All the small shareholder transfer agreements are signed. Mark's mother-in-law's. Done. She had her lawyer courier it. Arrived this afternoon. Chris's proxy agreement. The legal memo is done. The core clause that lack of a clear authorization period that makes it invalid. Will serve him with the formal notice tomorrow morning. I stared at the words on the screen for a moment. Then I replied, good. See you tomorrow. I put the phone in my pocket, shut down my computer, and walked out of the office. At the end of the hall, there was a window with a view of the city at night. The traffic moved like a glowing river, slow and steady. I stood there for a few minutes. The cool autumn breeze flowing in from a crack in the window. Starting tomorrow, all the accounts would be settled. Chris probably didn't know that he'd be getting a legal notice the moment he opened his phone in the morning. Mark probably didn't know that while he was planning his weekend, someone was preparing a new shareholder registry. I walked to the elevator and pressed the down button. The car came down from the top floor and chimed as it arrived. It was empty. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the basement. The elevator descended. The numbers ticked down. 7, 6, 5. That brief, sinking weightlessness in my stomach felt like a short fall. In the reflection on the metal wall, I saw my face, calm and steady, even a faint, almost imperceptible smile. See you tomorrow. Chapter 5. Monday morning. I arrived 40 minutes early. The office was empty except for the janitor mopping the floor. I went to my corner desk, sat down, and turned on my computer. As the screen lit up, a new email appeared in my inbox. It was from my brother's legal team. The subject line read, Notification of Shareholder Rights Amendment at Shenghe Tech. The attachment was a complete set of legal documents. The updated shareholder registry, the signed transfer agreements, the amended company bylaws, and a proposal for a board reshuffle. I spent 10 minutes reading every page. Then I closed the window, poured myself a glass of water, and waited to 88.40. My colleagues started trickling in. Zoe gave me a look when she saw me, probably wondering why I was so early, but she didn't say anything. Chris arrived at 9:00 sharp. He was in his starched shirt, carrying his coffee. As he passed my desk, he gave his usual morning. I said that. He sat down and turned on his computer. I saw him open his email. His expression froze. He stared at the screen for about 5 seconds, then sat up straight. He looked at me, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, as if confirming something. I gave him no reaction. I just kept looking at my screen. He quickly typed something on his phone, then walked to the hallway to make a call. His voice was muffled, but I could see his body language. Urgent, tense, trying to suppress a rising tide of emotion. 89.20. Mark arrived. He was wearing a navy suit, polished shoes, carrying his briefcase. He looked great. He gave a general nod to the office as he passed by and headed for his office. Chris intercepted him from the end of the hall. They spoke in low voices at Mark's door. Mark's expression went from relaxed to confused, from confused to a dawning, grim realization. He scanned the office, and his gaze landed on me. I looked back at him. He stared at me for a few seconds, then pushed open his office door. Leo. In here. I stood up, took my glass of water, and walked over. The whole office went quiet. The hum of the AC, the only sound. Everyone pretended to work, but their screens were frozen. I walked into Mark's office. The door closed behind me. Chris was already inside, standing by Mark's desk. His face was ashen. Mark sat in his chair. His computer screen glowed with an email header. Notice of Shareholder Rights Amendment. Leo. Mark looked up at me. His voice was tight, each word deliberate. That you'd better tell me what this email means. I pulled out a chair and sat down, placing my glass on the desk. Mark, as the legal representative and former majority shareholder of Shenghe Tech, you should be aware that the company's ownership structure has changed. I'll explain it to you. As of 9 o'clock this morning, the shareholder registry has been updated. Your stake has been reduced from 25% to 5%. Chris's proxy agreement has been ruled invalid. The new majority shareholder holds 51% of the shares. The new shareholder entity is Mingyuan Asset Management. Mark's face went pale. He stared at me, his lips moving, like he was trying to find the right words. He looked at Chris. Chris was looking back at him. Their eyes met in a silent, crumbling connection. Mingyuan. Mark repeated the name, as if searching for a lifeline. What does Mingyuan have to do with you? He's my brother. The air in the office froze. The AC felt like a cold blade. Chris took half a step back, leaning against the wall. Mark's hands were on his desk, his knuckles white. You're a brother, Mark. You've run this company for 8 years. I've been here for 4. You've been here twice as long as me. But you haven't taken Shenghe in a truly competitive direction. When you brought Chris in, it wasn't for the company's benefit. It was to keep control. You gave my projects away. You cut my permissions. You put me on filing duty. You did all that. I didn't say anything. But when you started messing with the company structure, you should have expected someone would push back. Mark's breathing grew heavy. His eyes darted between the documents. The computer, my face like a trapped animal looking for a way out. Leo, don't go too far. His voice was dry, strained. I have a history here. Relationships. A network. You can buy the shares. But you can't run this company without me, Mark. I cut him off. Relationships can be rebuilt. Networks can be rebuilt. But a signed transfer agreement is a signed transfer agreement. Your stake is now 5%. The new shareholder will propose a new board. Do you think you'll stay on as chairman? His hand lifted from the desk, then dropped, as if he was suppressing an impulse. Chris, next to him, was ashen. He finally understood why his proxy agreement had been declared invalid. My agreement. He rasped that it was a legal document. It was properly signed, the authorization period. I said that was left blank. That's a major legal defect. You can fight it in court, but the case will take at least 6 months. By then, the company's structure will have changed completely. Can you afford to wait that long? Chris was silent. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his gaze shattered on the floor. Mark was quiet for a long time. Then he sagged back into his chair. It was like all the strength had drained out of him. He just stared at the desk. Outside, I could hear the usual office sounds. Someone was on a call. Someone was laughing. Distant, muffled. A world of normalcy. Leo. Mark finally spoke. His voice was exhausted. Like a different person. What do you want? I want you to resign as chairman. After the new board takes over, you can keep your 5% stake as a founder's dividend, but you won't have any operational role. Chris, that your claim is invalid. You can leave, or you can renegotiate a new employment contract with the new shareholder. The terms are open for discussion. Mark looked up at me and laughed. It was a hollow laugh, devoid of sarcasm or anger. Just something deeply bitter. You're more ruthless than me. I just settled the accounts. I stood up, picked up my glass, and walked to the door. I paused with my hand on the handle. I didn't turn around, Mark. The Monday meeting is at 9:30. The new shareholder representative will be there. You'll be chairing it. You'll announce the restructuring to the whole company. I pushed the door open and walked out. 20+ faces turned toward me. Shock, bewilderment, a few with barely suppressed, gleeful excitement. Zoe stood by her desk, a pen in her hand. When she saw me, the corner of her mouth lifted. Come on, I said. Meeting. She smiled. She followed me into the conference room. Behind us, the hum of whispers rose like a pot of boiling water. The conference room was bright with sunlight. I sat on one side of the table. Behind me were Zoe and another colleague from tech. Mark came in last. His steps were slow. His tie was straight. His suit was neat. But he looked 5 years older. He sat at the head of the table, hands flat on the surface, staring at a stack of papers. Chris wasn't there. At exactly 9:30. The conference room door opened again. A tall, broad-shouldered man walked in, wearing a dark gray suit. He scanned the room, gave me a nod, and sat down beside me. My brother. He picked up the shareholder registry, looked at it, then put it down and smiled at everyone. Hello, I'm David. As of today, Shunhee Tech is entering a new phase. I'm here representing the new shareholder, and I look forward to working with all of you. Mark sat at the head of the table, his lips pressed into a thin line. His gaze swept past me, past my brother, and settled on the office towers outside the window. The sunlight fell on his face, illuminating every detail. I leaned back in my chair and took a sip of water. It was still warm. The meeting continued. Somewhere, someone started clapping. It echoed through the room. After the meeting, the company fell into a strange, quiet hum for the rest of the morning. No one openly discussed it, but everyone was talking with their eyes. Hushed conversations in the break room. A shredded notepad in the trash by the printer. Mark's office door was shut tight, blinds drawn. Chris never came in. His succulents and his mug were still on his desk, but his laptop was gone. 10:30. Maggie from HR came to see me. She stood by my desk, holding a file, her expression a mix of emotions, like she was meeting me for the first time. Mr. Chun, she said, her voice low. I have a few documents that need your signature. About the new organizational structure and staffing appointments. The title made me pause. For years, from Leo to Mr. Chin in the space of a day, it felt like an ill-fitting shirt, but not an unpleasant one. Maggie. Not yet. Let's stick with Leo. She let out a small sigh of relief. All right, Leo, what should we do about Mark's transition? Should we clear his office? Not yet. Let him have a couple of days. Handle the transition by the book. Don't rush him. She nodded. placed the file on my desk, and turned to leave. At the door, she stopped. Leo, that separation agreement from yesterday. I've already disposed of it. Thank you. Maggie, she left. I opened the file. Inside was a draft of a new appointment plan. Chairman. Vacant. Next line. General Manager, proposed. Leo Chin. I looked at it for a few seconds, closed the file, and put it back in the envelope. Not yet lunch. My brother met me at a restaurant downstairs. He'd ordered a full spread and opened a beer. I sat across from him, staring at the table. What? Not hungry. I'm hungry. But that's a lot of food. It's a celebration. My brother put a piece of braised pork on my plate. Look, I sent Mark a formal transition proposal this morning. It gives him a dignified exit. If he's smart, he'll take it. He'll still get his 5% dividend shares as long as the company stays profitable. That's not a bad deal. What about Chris? Chris is getting a legal notice. If he doesn't want to make a scene, he'll take his stuff and go. If he does, he'll have to explain how that invalid proxy agreement came to be. The courts can dig through the whole thing. I nodded and took a bite of food. Halfway through the meal, my phone rang. It was Mark. I looked at my brother, then answered. Mark? Leo? A pause. Mark's voice was calmer than it had been in the meeting. Like he'd had time to absorb it. I've thought about the transition plan. I'll accept it. I'll clear my office this afternoon. The handover will be done within the week. Good, Leo. He stopped me. There's one thing I want to ask. Go ahead. Bringing Chris in was my call. I admit it wasn't a fair move. But have you ever considered that if you'd been more communicative, less of a lone wolf, I might not have taken that step. I put down my chopsticks and leaned back, looking at the window. Mark, you say I should have communicated more. But during this whole process of pushing me out, did you communicate with me once? Did you tell me before Chris was hired? Did you call me while I was on my trip to explain? Silence. You call me a lone wolf. But for 4 years, I was the one bringing in clients, writing proposals, building systems. I did everything I could. All you had to do was put your name on the results. You wanted me to communicate, but you never listened. A long, quiet beat. Then Mark's voice, with a hint of weary laughter. You're right. He hung up. I looked at the food on the table. My brother didn't ask. He just poured me a cup of tea. It's done. It's done. I took a sip. That afternoon, he moved out. Mark's office door opened in the afternoon. He had 2 admin staff help him pack. He stood in the hallway, watching. I didn't go out to see him off, but from my desk, I could see him stop for a moment as he walked past the main office area. Then he didn't look back. He walked to the elevator. Chris came for his things at 4 p.m. He was in and out quickly. He didn't say a word. As he passed my desk, his steps slowed for a fraction of a second. I looked up. He didn't look back. He walked on. Zoe later told me that Chris had left his succulents behind. She put them on the windowsill of the break room. Someone else sat at his desk after that. A junior tech guy. Quiet. Hardworking. I spent 3 days bringing him up to speed. I gave him the template code, fully unencrypted, with all my notes. I've annotated every function in there. If you want to change it, feel free. He flipped through the pages. Leo, you wrote all this, yeah? Over 3 years. That's amazing. He was quiet for a moment. The tech team's been trying to figure out this optimization for a long time. Take your time. I said. In a rush. On Friday afternoon, we held the first all-hands meeting under the new structure. The conference room was packed. More chairs were brought in, because the tech team was invited. I stood at the front. The new organizational chart projected on the wall. In the general manager box, my name was printed. I paused for a moment. Then I said. I'm not going to go over the past. We all know what happened. Let's talk about the future. First, the project teams will be reorganized by vertical. Everyone will specialize in their own domain. Second, the digital process system I built will be open source to the whole company. Send me your feedback. I'll take it all. Third, I scanned the room. Some faces I knew. Some were new. Old colleagues who'd worked with me for years. And some fresh grads. They were all looking at me. Third, in the past, I've been a lone wolf. I wrote the proposals. I visited the clients. I stayed up late on the details. That stops now. From now on, every project is a team effort. If I don't know something, you teach me. If you don't know something, we'll learn it together. A beat of silence. Then, applause. Zoe was the first to clap. A sharp, percussive sound. It built, growing louder. More people joined in. Even the quiet tech guys were clapping. I stood in front of the room, my eyes stinging a little. The meeting broke up. I was alone in the conference room, the projection slowly dimming. Outside, the sky had gone dark. The lights of Financial Street glowed. My phone buzzed. A message from my brother. Mom's making your favorite braised ribs this weekend. Come home. I typed back. I'm in. The phone buzzed again. An unknown number. The message was, Leo, I heard you took over. Congratulations. And I'm sorry about what happened. No signature. But I recognized the number. It was Mark's old personal line. He'd changed his number. But the SIM was still in use for one last message. I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed back, thank you. Good luck. I pocketed the phone, turned off the lights, and walked out. The hallway was quiet, my footsteps echoing on the tiles. I paused at the elevator and glanced at Mark's old office. The door was open, empty except for an old desk and a blank wall. I pressed the button. The elevator opened. I stepped in and pressed lobby. As it descended, I caught my reflection in the metal wall. Same faded jacket, messy hair, heavy bags under my eyes. But the corner of my mouth was turned up. Monday. A new beginning. Chapter 6. The next 2 weeks felt like the company had been retuned. Every gear clicking into a new alignment. I spent a week fully opening up the process system, integrating it with the tech team's data platform and the marketing team's new CRM. On day 3, Ryan and his tech team gave me a list of 12 optimization suggestions. I changed 8 of them on the spot. The other 4 sparked a 2-hour argument in the break room, ending in a compromise that gave us a better solution than either of us had originally proposed. Ryan left the break room that day. He clapped me on the shoulder. Leo, if you'd become GM sooner, I would have proposed a tech team merger ages ago. I smiled that it's never too late. After the teams were reorganized, Zoe volunteered to lead a new business line, digital services for SMEs. It was something Shung he had never done well. Mark had always thought the margins were too thin and the sales cycle too long. Zoe said she wanted to try. I said, write me a proposal. She handed it in 3 days later. It was better than I expected. She stood in my office, a little nervous. Leo, if this line loses money, does it hit my bonus? If it loses money, it's on me. If it makes money, it's yours. She laughed. A real, unburdened laugh. Business moved quickly. New clients came in. I personally made calls to the old ones. The owner of the Chicago client said that you're finally back. The contact in Detroit told me, Chris tried, but we just didn't click. I documented all these conversations and sent them to the new project teams, letting them figure out the follow-up. Everything was heading in the right direction. Until Wednesday afternoon, when someone I never expected showed up at the office. It was around 3 p.m. I was going over the budget for the next quarter with finance. The front desk called my line. Mr. Chun, a gentleman is here to see you. He says he used to work at the company. He doesn't have an appointment. I put down my pen. Send him in. I asked the finance team to leave and sat down behind my desk. 2 minutes later, a knock on the door. Come in. The door opened. Chris stood in the doorway. He was wearing a gray jacket and looked thinner than when he'd left. His hair was a little disheveled. His expression was calm, but it was a calm that said I've thought about this, Leo. He said, can we talk? I looked at him and gestured to the chair across from me. Sit. Chris came in and sat down, placing a brown paper bag on the corner of my desk. He didn't jump into conversation. Instead, he looked around the office. The plants on the windowsill, the new filing cabinets, the whiteboard with the project timeline. He nodded. You've done a good job with this place. Are you here for a tour? No. He pulled his gaze back to me. I'm here to discuss something. He paused, as if organizing his words. After everything that happened, I talked to a lawyer. I wanted to know if I could challenge the validity of that proxy agreement. He said that, legally, I had a decent chance of winning, but it would be time-consuming and expensive. I did the math. It wasn't worth it. Oh, you're giving up the lawsuit. I'm giving up the lawsuit, Chris said. But I have a proposal. I said nothing. His fingers tapped lightly on his knee. My old company, an industrial internet platform. Bigger than this place. I worked there for 5 years. I have resources and contacts there. You're going into SME digital services. That platform is your upstream channel. If I help you open that connection, I can bring you a lot more client leads than you think. I leaned back. You want to come back? Not come back. He said, let's call it a recollaboration. I'm not asking for my old job or shares. I want a results-based contract. You set the targets. If I hit them, I get paid. If I don't, I walk. I don't need a desk. I don't need an email. You can treat me like a contractor. The room was quiet. Outside, a flock of birds passed, the whisper of their wings barely audible. Chris, I said, you came here to take my job. Now you're standing in front of me, offering to expand my business. Why should I trust you? He looked down, quiet for a moment. Then he reached into the paper bag and pulled out a folder, pushing it across the table. Look at this. I opened the folder. It was a comprehensive dossier. The organizational structure of the industrial internet platform, the key decision makers, their contact info, the upstream and downstream models, and potential partnership opportunities. It was detailed, very detailed. Some of the information wasn't publicly available. I spent 2 weeks putting this together. Chris said, without upstream support, that business line of yours will peak at a regional level. With this, you could go statewide, or even multi-state. This is my gesture of goodwill. I finished reviewing the last page and closed the folder, keeping it on the desk. I looked at Chris. He looked back at me, his gaze without flattery or resentment. It was a simple I've laid my cards out. You decide. Fine. I said. Chris's expression flickered. He hadn't expected me to agree so quickly. Fine. I repeated, but I have conditions. 1. We work on a project-by-project basis. Each contract is separate. 2. Your information about that platform stays confidential. It's only for Sheng He-related business. 3. I looked him in the eyes. I won't forget what you did, but I won't hold on to it either. Everything you do from now on, I'll be watching. Do you accept? Chris's lips twitched. Then he extended his hand. I accept. I shook his hand. It was different from the one I'd shaken with Ryan at the tea house. That had been an alliance. This was a clean, hard contract. We shook and let go. Chris stood and gestured to the folder. Read it over. Any questions? You know my number. He turned and walked to the door. He paused, his back to me. Leo, one more thing. I waited. Back then, when I took your place, it was my decision. But Mark chose me because he knew I could do things he couldn't. He's the kind of guy who wouldn't know how to use power if you gave it to him. You're not like that. You'd know what to do, whether you had the title or not. I respect that. He opened the door and walked out. I sat at my desk, looking at the folder. The afternoon sun slanted in, catching the edge of the cover in a beam of light. I put the folder in my drawer and returned to the budget spreadsheet. Later that evening, Zoe passed by my office and poked her head in. Leo, I heard someone came to see you. A guy named Chris. Yeah? We talked. He didn't make trouble, did he? No. He came to talk business. Zoe's expression was a little complicated, but she didn't press. All right. I'm heading out. See you tomorrow. See you tomorrow. She left. I sat alone in my office for a while, looking out at the nightscape, at the sea of warm yellow lights. I thought about what Chris said earlier. You'd know what to do, whether you had the title or not. Maybe he was right. Maybe. In Mark's system, I was always destined to be a difficult subordinate, because I didn't need permission to get things done. And in Chris's world, he could see that, and turn it into a card on the negotiating table. I picked up my phone and messaged my brother. Chris came to see me today. He wants to collaborate. The reply was quick. What do you think? We can try it. Results-based. If he delivers, great. If not, we cut it. Your call. Mom's making dumplings this weekend. You should come. Good. I turned off the office lights, locked the door, and walked out. There was a draft coming through a window at the end of the hall. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of osmanthus. Autumn was almost over, but the flowers were still blooming. I pressed the elevator button and watched the numbers tick down. A new structure was taking shape. Mark was gone. Chris was back, but in a completely different way. The employees were still adjusting, but the mood had already shifted. The elevator reached the lobby. I walked through the lobby, and the receptionist called out, "Good night, Mr. Chun." I turned, waved, and pushed open the glass door. The outside air was crisp. I took a deep breath and walked toward the subway station. Chapter 7. As the end of the year approached, Sheng He Tech held its annual dinner at a resort on the outskirts of the city. They'd booked the whole banquet hall. In attendance were not only the company employees, but several key client representatives. Ryan Wong brought his wife and kids. Maggie from HR brought her parents. A banner was hung across the stage reading, "New Beginnings." Together, Zoe was in charge of the event. She'd been working on it for 2 weeks, organizing the venue, the flow, the entertainment. She even printed multiple seat assignments and revised them meticulously before the event. She tracked me down backstage, holding her schedule. "Leo, are you ready for your speech?" "I've got it." "Off the cuff or reading from notes?" "Off the cuff." She gave me a look, as if unconvinced, but she just patted my shoulder and ran off to check the sound system. Almost 100 people packed the hall. The lighting was warm, the tables adorned with flowers and red wine. Every dish was a specialty of the resort's head chef. I sat at the main table next to my brother, who'd been invited as the representative of Ming Yuan. Ryan sat across from me, introducing his wife to the other guests. Next to him were the younger tech guys, all dressed in suits tonight, looking a little uncomfortable, but smiling. After the opening remarks, the host invited me to the stage. I stood, walked up, and took the microphone. The room hushed. I looked at the faces below. Colleagues I'd worked with for 4 years, new hires from 3 months ago, and people who hadn't talked to me much under Mark's management, but now greeted me when we passed. Zoe sat in the second row, still clutching the schedule. She gave me a thumbs up. First of all, thank you to Zoe and the planning team. The venue is perfect, and the food is delicious. The light laugh rippled through the room. That I don't want to make this overly formal. 3 things. The room went quiet. First, Shenghe Tech has completed the first phase of its transition. The digital system is fully online. The SME business line has doubled its client volume. The tech department received an industry certification we didn't have before. For the actual numbers, you can read the financial report. I won't go through it here. The only thing I'll say is, these achievements aren't mine. They're yours. The applause that followed was scattered, but sincere. Second, I said, as the applause died down, that the company will be launching an employee stock ownership plan next year. Core tech and management positions will be eligible. The details will be announced after the new year. I'm not saying I'm in charge of everything. I'm saying that if you do the work, you'll get your share. The applause was twice as loud. I heard someone from the tech department whistle. Third, I paused and scanned the room. This time last year, I was on a business trip. When I came back, my desk was gone. My access was cut. I stood there, looking at a stranger drinking coffee in my spot. And do you know what I thought? Silence. That I didn't think about revenge. I wasn't angry. I thought, this thing I built over 3 years. Why should someone be able to just take it? But then I realized, the things that are truly yours can't be taken away. The code you wrote, the clients you visited, the late nights, the skills you learned, they're all in you. Someone can take your desk, your nameplate, your project number, but they can't take what you can do. I lowered the microphone a little. My voice softer. I'm standing here today, not because I got rid of someone, but because I learned to keep doing the work that matters. And everything else came back. A beat of silence. Then the applause came. A warm wave. Everyone clapping. Zoe stood up. Ryan stood up. My brother stayed seated, but he was smiling at me, nodding. I walked back to my seat through the applause. My eyes stung for a moment, but I held it together. My brother poured me a glass of juice and said, "Lo, nice speech. You taught me that. I didn't teach you that. You figured it out yourself." He clinked his glass against mine. The rest of the night was a blur of laughter, karaoke, and raffle prizes. Tech and marketing had a heated argument about a game's rules, and Ryan had to mediate. Zoe and some of the other women took selfies in the corner, their laughter sharp and bright. 9 p.m. The event was winding down. I stepped outside to the terrace for some fresh air. The night was cool, the resort surrounded by the dark outlines of mountains, a scattering of stars overhead. Someone came up behind me. I turned. It was Ryan. He leaned on the railing with a cup of tea, looking at the mountain silhouettes. "Leo, how much of the stock ownership plan can the tech department get?" "That depends on what you produce next year." He laughed. "Good. I'll use that to justify making my team work even harder." We stood side by side for a while. The night wind carried the scent of pine. Mr. Wong, I said 6 months ago, back at that tea house. "Did you ever think Shenghe would be where it is today?" He thought about it, then shook his head. "Never. Back then, I thought the company was just stuck. You did the work, went home. It was a job, no expectations. But now, it's different." "How?" "Before, it was, what is the boss telling me to do? Now it's, what can I do?" He took a sip of tea. "That's a big difference. You may not realize it, but people talk. Since you took over, there's less arguing in the conference rooms. There's more people talking about plans in the break room." I laughed and didn't say anything. The terrace door swung open. Zoe leaned out, half her body in the light. "Leo, Ryan, what are you two doing out here?" "They're cutting the cake. Get in here." "Coming." I turned to go back in. At the door, I glanced back at Ryan. He was still looking at the mountain, his jacket billowing in the breeze. I went back inside. The hall was warmly lit. A 3-tiered cake sat at the center, with "New Beginnings" written in cream on the top. Zoe handed me the knife. "Leo, you make the first cut." I took the knife. Everyone crowded around. Cameras clicked. Someone yelled, "Cut a big slice." I looked at the inscription, then "Cut cleanly down." The cake parted. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I read it later. It was a message from my brother. "Zoe told me that in her 3rd year, she was almost let go. You helped her get a transfer, and she stayed. She wanted me to tell you this. She knew back then that someone like you would one day lead the way." My hand paused on the knife, then kept going. Zoe was in the crowd, eyes bright, snapping photos of me. I didn't ask her about the message. After the cake was handed out, people began to trickle out. I stood at the door, shaking hands, patting shoulders, saying good luck next year. The young tech guy who'd taken over Chris's desk walked up to me. Leo, I'm going to read through all the annotated code you left. I promise I'll have it all down by next year. Don't rush. Take it slow. No. I want to learn it fast, so I can help you do more. He ran off. His silhouette stretched long by the resort's lights. Zoe was the last to leave. She stood at the door, holding the 2 remaining bags of candy from the party. Looking at me, Leo, what are your plans for next year? Lots. First, finalize the employee stock plan. Then find a bigger channel for clients. Chris sent me 3 leads last week, and I need to meet them myself. Then upgrade the tech department's certifications. Ryan wants more people. We'll need to hire after the new year. Sounds like a lot. She said. A lot of work. I smiled. But fun work. She smiled. She turned to go, then stopped. Leo, next year, we're having the annual dinner at a better place. You pick it. She waved and walked away. Her shadow stretched under the streetlights, then turned a corner and disappeared. I stood alone at the entrance. It was quiet. A few more stars had appeared. The wind carried the clean scent of grass. I checked my phone. 10:23 p.m. The event ended earlier than expected. I texted my mom. I'll be home for lunch tomorrow. A reply came instantly. Good. I pocketed my phone. Went back in to grab my jacket. The lights were still on. The staff were clearing the tables. Cake plates and wine glasses were stacked high. A quiet warmth left behind by the noise. I put on my jacket and stepped out, pulling the door shut behind me. Outside, the night was still. In the parking lot, headlights flickered on one by one, forming a slow-moving river of light stretching back toward the city. Tomorrow was another workday. New projects, meetings, challenges waiting on the calendar. But for now, there was the breeze, the stars, and the certainty that next year would be better. I got in my car and started the engine. In the rearview mirror, the resort's warm lights glowed. Shadows moved in the windows. People cleaning up. Saying goodbye. I pulled out of the lot and onto the road home. The radio was playing a song, the melody light and low. The streetlights passed one by one, like the retreating frames of old memories. Ahead, the dark road was open, lined with scattered lights, leading toward the city. I gripped the steering wheel and hummed a few bars of the song. A new day, starting tomorrow morning.